plume gate. The Fukushima nuclear disaster is far from over, and in fact it could get much, much worse. The spent reactor fuel that they stored up on reactor 4, which is the reactor right now that they're very, very much worried about, because if somehow the containment vessel is breached,
the vessel's been breached. The vessel's
Check your news now. This would release, if this were to happen, it would release 85 times the radioactivity than released in Chernobyl. It sits in these pools that are suspended 100 feet in the air, right? And the whole containment to it is blasted away with the explosions that happened last year, right? So these structures themselves are extremely vulnerable. If there is even a 7.2 earthquake, and they have earthquakes every day almost there in Japan, all the time, right? If there was a serious earthquake there, right, there was a good chance that this could happen. And what would happen, this is just unbelievable how damaging this could be. There was a senator from the United States that just got back from there, and he was saying basically they built these walls out of bags of rocks to protect against a tsunami. That's their defense. And this rickety structure that's holding up these spent fuel rods, that's 85 times more radioactive than Chernobyl, right? If this is released into the air,
Hi there, everyone. You were just listening to one of our first podcasts on Free Radio Revolution almost 2 years ago, where we were discussing Fukushima. Unfortunately, that podcast was attacked and shut down. Basically, the information, they didn't want this information getting out at that time. I had to take down the video for fears of losing the show on YouTube, at least. But unfortunately, not much has changed in regards to Fukushima. Here off 4chan News, this is from today. What is happening at Fukushima? The world is responding to Japan's call for help at the stricken Fukushima nuclear plant, but with reports of leaks, contamination, and a risky new operation, Channel 4 News asks, is it too late? Last week, the Japanese government finally admitted what many feel should have been done, 2.5 years ago, that it cannot cope with the world's worst nuclear disaster of all time alone, right? Here's the quote from the Prime Minister. We are wide open to receive the most advanced knowledge from overseas to contain the problem. My country needs your knowledge and expertise. Like, how stupid can you be by not doing this, 2.5 years ago? Of course, reports of leaks, radiation exposure, and other issues, from rats gnawing on cables to workers mistakenly removing pipes and exposing 6 colleagues to radioactive water, or pouring out of the stricken Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in northeast Japan as fast as the radioactive water itself appears to be leaking into the sea. And the international community has responded. An International Atomic Energy Authority mission has landed in Japan to assess the situation. The agency will also monitor levels of radiation in the oceans and plans another trip to the plant in the next few months. Separately, Channel 4 News can reveal that the Japanese government and plant operator, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, have already quietly drafted in an international body of experts to try to contain the situation. The International Research Institute for Nuclear Decommissioning, set up about a month ago, was launched with a press conference in Japan, but almost no international fanfare, because we know the mainstream corporate media does not report on this story unless something extraordinary happens, which even then Experts in Japan say it's about time the situation is taken seriously after months of denials, obfuscation from authorities. And Professor Komi Hosokawa, who wrote Fukushima's section in 2013 World Nuclear Report, told Channel 4 News the situation is not under control. Almost every day new things happen, and there is no sign that they will control the situation in the next few months or years. It is really a deflating situation to look into what is going on. One of the biggest fears now would be another earthquake happening. Listen in here, Global Research.
Right now the world faces a terrifying crisis. The fuel rods and the spent core at Fukushima Unit 4 are 100 feet in the air. It's hard to comprehend, but the General Electric design, which was the design used at Fukushima, set up the fuel storage pool to be 100 feet in the air, and as a result of the accident, the residual rods from this unit are in a very, very precarious position. Now, we know that the earthquake did tremendous damage to Fukushima Units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Thankfully, Units 5 and 6 were higher up and were not as badly harmed. We have had explosions at Units 1, 2, and 3, and the cores from Units 1, 2, and 3 are in the ground somewhere. We don't know exactly where they are. The utility company, TEPCO, and the Japanese government have been pouring water onto the site, hoping to keep these cores cool. Unfortunately, we have had steam emissions at the site, which indicates there's still at least some heat coming from one or more of these cores. The problem right now is Unit 4. Just prior to the earthquake, Tokyo Electric Power Company removed the core from Unit 4 to do routine maintenance and refueling. And they put that very, very hot core into the fuel pool 100 feet in the air. When the earthquake came, it significantly damaged the building at Unit 4. It may have damaged the fuel pool. It may have damaged some of the fuel. And for the last year and a half, since March 11th, 2011, this fuel core, with some 1,300 or more fuel rods in it, it weighs 400 tons, and it contains as much radiation as would be necessary to deliver 13,000 times as much radioactive fallout as was released at Hiroshima.
Reporting on this the first time, that the suspended fuel pools were one of the great dangers of the whole scenario, particularly the fuel pool on Unit 4, which wasn't even in an active, it wasn't even on the reactor itself when the earthquake and subsequent tsunami happened. So much of what has occurred at Fukushima, it could have been prevented, could have very easily been prevented with just common sense, especially when designing the plant. General Electric and Ibasco, the American companies, actually built the first 4 reactors, and it's mostly their fault for the way that the whole situation played out. Had they had not built the reactors so close to the water, at the bottom of a hill, so many things. I wanted to show a bit here again from Global Research. I'm going to put these links below. Arnie Gunderson has been one of the very best in the world at dissecting and reporting on Fukushima, and he was ridiculed by many so-called nuclear experts or pundits within the mainstream media right after the event occurred, but he has been right on the money from day one that this Fukushima incident is indeed Chernobyl on steroids. Let's listen into a little bit of this video here on the terrible decisions that have been made and are going to be made.
Well, what Tokyo Electric is now planning to do, because we've got radioactive basements being constantly flooded with something like 400 tons of water every day, is they're going to build a trench all the way around Unit 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they're going to pump it full of very cold liquids through pipes and freeze it. And this is what's called the ice wall. So an ice wall will go on the land side of the buildings that had exploded, and it'll turn the corner, and then it will go down the water side of the turbine halls, and hopefully they're going to freeze more than a mile's worth of soil in the process. Now, there's no guarantees it'll work. It's never been tried before on such a large scale. And even if the wall works, there's no guarantee that it will seal with bedrock. So we still may have leakage in the future with the ice wall. And, oh, by the way, it's going to take at least 2 years before they build that ice wall, which means this thing is going to continue to leak into the Pacific for at least 2 years. Well, while we're on the subject of the ice wall, I want to talk about the book I wrote 2 years ago. This problem of radioactivity in the basements was foreseeable back then. And the plant manager at Daiichi saw that there was going to be a problem in April right after the accident occurred. So it didn't take a genius to figure out that these basements were going to flood. In the book I wrote, I talked about the need to build a zeolite trench on the high side of these buildings, on the land side of these buildings. And the reason I wanted that was not to keep the radioactive material from getting into the ocean, but to keep the clean water from getting into the power plant. Now, you can think of these power plant basements as a bathtub. And if you've got the spigot on and the drain closed, what Tokyo Electric is trying to do is build the walls higher as this bathtub begins to fill. Well, my approach isn't to build the walls higher. My approach is to turn the spigot off. The trick here was not to try to prevent the water from getting into the ocean. The trick was to keep the clean water out. That's why the zeolite trench, if it had been built 2 years ago, would have allowed engineers to go up on the hill and pump clean water right out into the ocean. It would not have been contaminated because the zeolite trench would have prevented that from flowing out.
So as you can see, there's been stupid decision after stupid decision with regards to the situation there and dealing with it. This video here is really excellent. I'm going to put the links below. But what he gets into is how this area here is all up on a hill. This is where they have the storage for the fuel, where they're trying to store the fuel in these tanks here, and these tanks are leaking, and the water is going downhill and into the ocean, also filling up the basements of the reactors and the turbine buildings that are here. Just everything that they've done since the situation has done little to improve it. If anything, has made things worse, and now we're facing terrible, terrible consequences because of this. There's another typhoon now that could very well threaten the Fukushima, could hit Fukushima dead on, and this could cause building like number 4, Unit 4, perhaps even Unit 3 to collapse with those suspended fuel rods and release unbelievable amounts of radioactive material into the air, which would go directly into the jet stream, which would eventually dump onto North America. There's really no end to what is going on, and it's quite unbelievable. It's even here how stupid some of these Japanese proposals here. One, a professor, I believe, philosophy professor, says, well, let's turn it into a tourist attraction. Sure, come and get your cesium for the day, right? Get your healthy dose. A Japanese philosophy professor and cultural critic has stirred controversy with calls for Fukushima to be made into a tourist attraction. The best way to make sure, quote, the memories of the disaster don't fade away. Yes, like they should be fading away since the thing is going full steam ahead. He proposes that a nearby disused sports facility should be converted into an immense visitor center for both amusement and education, which would allow people to tour the plant and clean up as the cleanup continues. How incredibly stupid do you have to be to come up with something like that? You may very well have to abandon a huge part of Japan just to be able to deal with this in the future. There's so much more information, and there's a lot of really good YouTubers out there. I will put links below. I am out of time. I hope you got something out of it. Leave your comments below.